What's up, Marcus? Marcus, the only guy who's here on Super Bowl weekend. What is up? And you said it's not really. Well, I saw that comment earlier. You're gonna be sleeping. Oh yeah, you're gonna here. Let me. Where is it? Something just moved. Sorry. What? There you go. You're gonna be sleeping during the show unless I show some art. Shit, really? Man, you might fall asleep because there's only maybe you and West who's showing up, and David Matheny just came in too. Oh, hey, there's it. Now that everybody's starting to slowly trickle in. Doesn't show up on my screen though. It makes it look like I don't know. Maybe the data is slow. There's more of you in the chat than appears to show on screen, but whatever. Hello, hi, thanks for the warm welcomes, of course. I know you're not here, Mr. Redjack. You'll be missed, but I hope you're having a good sleep, of course. Carlos, you're an hour. Carlos, you came an hour early. What's up with you, dude? First, you always come at the last minute when we're closing out the show, and now you're coming in an hour early. It's I don't know, man. You're gonna have to figure this one out, dude. Superb Owl Sunday. You know, I've seen you do that joke before, Marcus, and I gotta say, I don't know if I missed it. Maybe I missed it, but what's the whole owl separate thing? I'm not getting it. I'm not getting it. Explain it to me so I don't feel so out of the loop. Okay. Oh, and by the way, as for this comment, dude, I really had no plans to do that. So I don't know. You might have to fall asleep, you know. What's the Super Bowl? What's the Super Bowl feast at that? Oh, yeah. No, we don't really do that. It's just kind of a regular day and have regular lunch and yeah, you know. Vivian usually goes out and buys me snacks to eat or whatever. But like, it's not like I need the snacks, you know. But yeah, other than that. Yeah, regular day. Yeah, we don't make a big to-do out of it. I like to watch the game, like literally watch and focus in on the game. So I don't even like to have friends over. Like even my friend Robert next door. You know, sometimes, you know, we've watched football together, but typically I prefer to watch it alone just because I can focus. Yeah. I don't want to make it about too much about party or whatever, you know. And yes, David, let's go KC, baby. Not that I really have skin in the game, but if I'm going to root for anybody today, it is KC that I'll be rooting for. As a guy who has always followed players, they are the ones who have the players I like more. So my homie Mahomes, I would love to see him win another one. So that's who I'm rooting for. Hey, West. Good to see you, sir. And yeah, so the owl thing isn't too okay. Well, thank you. What am I? Of course not, CJ. Come on, man. You're my number. You're my. How did he say it again? You're my number one. Remember in the first Batman movie? Yeah. So no chopped liver for you, sir. Hey, Rickster. What's up, man? And when are we going to get a calf crib? Probably never, my friend. Probably never. As well, okay. What else we got here? Super Bowl is trademarked. Yeah, but I believe if you really want to get technical about it, I think you're okay if you don't write it the way they do or use the font they use, or I don't know, something like that. It's some weird thing. But anyways, a small channel like mine, it's gonna be all right. Super Bowl is not. I see. Okay, yeah. I got you. Actually, in fact, I do believe the official way is 2 words, and so all you need to really do, just to be 100% safe, is make it 1 word. Like some people mistakenly do that, anyways, right? Do Super Bowl 1 word, and I think if you do that, then you've circumvented the law or whatever. I decided to just write it the right way anyways, because like I said, I'm not using their logo or their font or whatever, so I think we'll be all right. I'm not worried we'll get shut down, so that's cool. But all right, guys, let me bring in my pal Jason into the studio here.
Hello.
How are you, sir?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing well, thanks. Thanks for agreeing to just come in and hang with me, man.
Absolutely. Hello, chat.
So, guys, and Marcus, I did not prepare any art to show because honestly, I was going to. Okay, this is what I thought. I thought, maybe I'll grab a few images of pieces that Jason owns, and why not? We'll show some of his art. But then I feel, you know what? I like Jason, and I would rather, if I'm going to show his art, I kind of would rather give him a little more shine and, have him back eventually as an official like show and tell. And we'll, the whole show will be like revolved around showing Jason's collection. And yeah, I think that'd be more fun. What do you think, Jason?
I better get buying.
Well, no, listen, keep in mind that I typically, for a show and tell episode, I typically limit it to 20. So you must have 20 pieces.
I do.
Hey!
I could do that. I could do that.
The show it's in the works already. Yeah, that's perfect. No, because I mean, having done it enough times already, just from experience, I know that particularly because of how I have sort of designed the shows to sort of be very revolved around interacting with all the other guys in the chat. When you combine all that chatting we do with 20 pieces,
sure,
it's enough to fill out like an entire typical 2.5 hour, 2:45 type show for me, which most of them are, Yeah. So I figure as long as you got 20 pieces, yeah, we can do it anytime, So that's why we don't have art for that. Now I gotta say, guys, I got so much crap around here. I have piles of art everywhere around me, and most of it, of course, is it's Andrew Hennessy's. And so I might as well just mention now, the reason that is because since he wasn't doing it, I made the executive decision to have him take back all of his art. And that is to say, if you guys remember, after I did those last few, or the last Andrew Hennessy sale I did, I mentioned at the time that I had pulled enough art for one last show of, the best stuff I could find that he still had remaining. And ultimately I decided, you know what? I think the crowd's Hennessy'd out at this point. We did enough shows for that, and that's fine. And they went overall very well. I was very happy with the sales. So was he. So that's fine. And I decided I'm not going to do another one. And then after deciding that, I spoke to him about sending back that art, the remainders of what, what didn't sell during those shows we did. And yeah, I said, whatever, I'll be sending that to you soon. And then after thinking about it a little while, I decided, you know what? If I send that stuff back to him, I'm only going to be left with the stuff that I felt was not really interesting enough to even bother trying to do a sale on a YouTube show with, So I thought, well, if it's the less interesting pages, what's the point, right? Like are people, that stuff's going to sell one page every blue moon kind of thing. So I figure I'm essentially at that point just becoming a storage unit for him. I mean, it's true though. Don't you kind of feel that, right? Like if any artist were to say, yeah, send me back all the best stuff, but yeah, you can keep the unsellable stuff, right? Like It's kind of like what's pointless, right? So I recently just decided, okay, yeah, there's a ton of stuff here. I'm gonna pack it up. The logistics are crazy. I've never had to pack up this much art before to send back. So I don't know how I'm gonna do it. It'll be over the next few weeks, but whatever. So I'm sending everything back, and I will then at that point officially no longer be representing Andrew Hennessy. Yeah, so that's official. But Marcus, like if I'm looking around here and I'm trying to see, hey, what can I grab that's within reach? I can show some art, but at the same time, I don't know. I'm thinking that there's so many piles here that I'm like, was some of this the stuff that I showed, or was this stuff this part of the stuff I was going to show on that last episode, and I think it's the latter, right? But like, I don't know. You tell me. I think it's the latter. Does anybody remember me ever showing this one? And this is a Brad Walker from the Sinestro series, featuring, of course, Sinestro, Arquillo, and all the other Yellow Lanterns or whatever.
I don't remember that one.
No? Okay, so then no. This is probably part of the stuff I was going to do on my last show. This is a $750 piece. If anybody's interested, let me know. We can talk. But yeah, I mean, basically, it was a lot of Sinestro stuff that I wanted to show primarily because of Mr. Red Jack, because he's a fan of the Sinestro series, and I figured, might as well offer some stuff. But like I said, I'm not going to ultimately do that show. There is one thing here lying around, and because of the fact that my portfolio is full and I need one extra space, but don't really want to buy another portfolio for this one space. I got a piece here. I don't think it'd be of much interest to people. If I could find it. Hold on a second, everyone. Thank you for your patience. So this is my collection. Okay, so here we go. So, not that there's many people here or whatever, and it's not like a great page, believe me. So this is it's a great annual. It's an Action Comics annual number 3, which features Superman becoming the president of the United States. And then there's a sequence in that story where the Justice League pop in for like a dozen pages. Love those pages. This does not have that. It's from after that sequence. It's not really much here. Let me try to put myself here momentarily, so you could see it better. But yeah, so it's basically shots of outer space. Hey, look, Jewish space lasers, everybody. For those of you who listen to politics every now and then, if you don't, it's a political thing. You might have heard of with what's her name, Marjorie Taylor Greene or whatever her name is. Yeah, so it's Tom Grummett, and there's Superman, and the whole page is him giving a speech. And it's actually, this page, while it doesn't have a lot of visual exciting content, it's a great page literally for the dialogue, because it's really cool with Superman speaking like the president, talking about, I don't know, my fellow Americans, today we've taken a bold step, long overdue, to begin fulfilling the third of Franklin Delano Roosevelt's 4 freedoms. Freedom from want. Today, the first of our promised series of orbital solar power stations were successfully deployed, blah, blah, blah. And all this stuff about the realization of this source of safe energy will free us all from the economic tyranny of fossil fuels. So actually, really like 30 some odd years ahead of its time, because all this type of talk is actually currently in the news and in the media, right? So kind of cool for that, but again, visually not what you would necessarily typically buy. But yeah, if anybody's interested in a page like this, it's a rare time that I would sell a Grummett piece. But like I said, I'm only selling it because it's the only piece that won't fit into a full portfolio. That's probably like $200 or something. Yeah. So there you go. Here we go. Space DC. Exactly. CJ says, and sorry, let me bring you back there. Sorry about that, Jason.
No worries.
Any new PC illustrations? What's PC illustrations, CJ? PC.
Personal collection. I think he meant any additions for your personal collection.
For my collection? Is that what you're asking, CJ? Carlos, you finally figured it out. Yes, you're here at closer to the beginning than the end of the show. Awesome, man. Good to see you, dude. Okay, hold on. Let me just quickly catch on to. Should get more mileage out of all the slides you made and do it one more time on a quiet weekend. You mean the Hennessy show? The last Hennessy show? Because I didn't make the slides for that last show. That's the thing. So, and why do it on a quiet weekend if that just sort of defeats the purpose? It's less likely to sell anything, you know? So, yeah, that's kind of my view on it. David and Oz, good to see you, sir. And wait a second. Why are you awake? It's like 4 or 5 in the morning for you right now. This time you can say you're at work. Why are you awake already?
That's dedication for you right there.
Wow. Let me know, David. I don't know if it's dedication or if he just happened to be up. Boy, I would feel guilty if he said it was dedication. I'd feel honored, but that's kind of crazy. I'd say get the hell back to sleep, sir. Wow. Hey, always a good day for a Jeff wedding. Good to see you, sir. And who else do we got here? Oh, so CJ, yes, you're right, Jason. I guess that's what he meant. Your past 6 pieces were DC. Nice. Gotta show DC some love. Way too many Marvel fans, David, right? Hand pink. Oh man, why do you guys always do these weird things that I don't understand what you're talking about? Hand pink waving? Are you telling me that you're doing this to me to say hello back? I don't know what that pink thing means.
I bet he picked an emoji, but for some reason it didn't come up as the emoji.
Oh.
It actually spelled out what it's doing.
Okay, that's okay. Maybe. Okay, hello. So strange. Okay. Renewable energy for the flat earth is a scam. Oh, that's funny. Okay. Yeah, I mean, that's just how I feel, you know? What can I, yeah. Just saying hi. There you go. Okay, thanks, Carlos. Thanks, man. Thanks. When you're you were saying when you're the only game in town. Yeah. And it's right. Well, yeah, we figured that out now. But it's so weird. Why doesn't it show? It makes me think that it has something to do with like on what type of device you might be sending it in from. Maybe that's how it kind of glitches or something, right?
Yeah, I wonder.
Oh, David, wow. So you're in one of those parts of Oz where you're currently 16 hours ahead. Wow. Wow. Watching on the train on the way to work. Wow. Thank you, sir. That is so cool of you, man. Thank you. That's wild. Holy crap. 16 hours, man. Oh, have a good work day, by the way. And don't get fired. I don't want you to ever tell me you got fired because you were watching me. And man, I'm coming late to this one, and so I don't know. It's only a minute ago, but and a ninja organization. What's a ninja organization?
The hand.
The hand. Oh, the hand. Unless it's this talk to the hand. Jason is the interpreter. Yeah. Hey, Tariq, good to see you, sir. Nikki, jumping in to ask everyone to say, hit that thumbs up. Yes, thank you. Please hit the thumbs up. Not many of you here, but that means all the more reason you should all hit the thumbs up. There's only a few of you here. So please hit the thumbs up. And yes, rally a few more likes, a couple of more to 10. Here we go with that. And why not, since almost nobody's here, let me remind everybody, Friday nights at 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock p.m. in the afternoon on the West Coast. Check out Nikki's show. And it is a sales show. You'll get some fun laughter in the chat, as well as opportunities to buy affordable art and occasionally some higher end art. But primarily, it's a fun show, good way to end your work week. And so for that reason alone, a lot of us tune in, and you should too, if you're watching and listening to me say these words right now. So there you go. Friday, 7 p.m. Eastern, 4 o'clock p.m. only on the EXP, which is, let me show you so you burn it into your mind. There you go. YouTube.com/the-EXP. All right. Okay. So let me come back to you all and say, yeah, okay. So there you go. Exactly. It's fun. And now Marcus has done one of those things where I don't know if he's probably doing it on purpose, where it's like, okay, yeah, rectangle, empty rectangle for us. Okay, whatever. So Jason, let me ask you something, since it's been a little while since you were last on in the studio hanging out with me.
Yeah.
I don't know, what has it been, like 2 or 3 months, something like that, probably ish.
Yeah, at least, yeah.
Something like that, right? In that time that has passed, it's not that it's been a long time, obviously, right? But you're a newer guy to the hobby, so it's well worth asking. Has there been anything that has happened or that you've seen, experienced in that time that you may also want to sort of throw out there and ask me, the crowd, that maybe we can talk about?
Yeah. So one thing I've been trying to get better at, but I have to admit I'm slow at, is seeing folks in the chat or hearing you when you're talking about looking at art and saying, oh, that's Colin inks, or that's Alcala inks, or whatever. How do you guys learn to recognize an inker who is going over someone else's pencils? I mean, Kirby art is Kirby art. That's easy to pick up. But when you're trying to pick up subtleties of, how do you learn an inker's work? Is there stuff that you guys look at in particular? Is it just time and enough pages go by? What's your method?
Yeah, I'll since I'm the only one who can actually respond immediately, I'll give you my response, and hopefully some of the guys in the chat we'll see what they have to say. I want to see what they say. I would think it'd be a pretty similar response, but I mean, you kind of answered it yourself at the end, right? Where the easy answer is time and experience. So in other words, the more you expose your eyes to as many pencilers and as many inker combinations as possible, the more you will ultimately end up starting to see, this inker inking that guy. And you'll look at it, you'll see, okay, who inked this? And you'll see, okay, so it's this inker. Oh, okay, interesting. And a little picture of what that combination looks like will sort of be put into the back of your brain, so to speak. And then eventually you'll look at another piece and you'll look at the credits. Oh, who inked this? And you'll be like, oh, that's the same guy who inked that last piece I was wondering about, right? And then the more you do that over and over and over and over, your brain eventually starts to recognize that there are certain similarities in how the inker lays down his brush lines, or his, in most cases they use pen, but little pen lines, and what the line looks like. And that's it. That is ultimately how you end up starting to recognize, oh, this kind of looks like you'll find yourself thinking the inks here look kind of similar to what I remember on that Colin page or whoever page,
Mm-hmm.
And then you'll find yourself looking up the credits, and you'll eventually get to that point where you're like, oh, it is that guy, right? And that's all it is. It's the constant repetition where you see enough of this stuff and as long as you make that conscious effort to always want to know who the inker is, because that's important, right?
Right.
Because if you ignore the inker and wanting to know the inker's name on everything that you look at, of course it'll be more difficult, because you're not attaching a name to the style that you're looking at. You know what I mean? So it becomes more difficult. But if you make it a point to always look, it starts to become this, it'll click. It'll just click, and it becomes second nature more and more, that you start to know, hey, I can pick this guy's inking style out pretty easy now. I know when a page has a style, and that's pretty much it. Let me see what some other guys have to say. Let me see. Oh, and Maki Poo Poo, good to see you, sir. Don't ever apologize for being late. I appreciate you being here, even if it's for 1 second. Thank you so much. I appreciate it, man. So sorry. So Nick couldn't make Florida. Okay. So that tricky Marcus. Okay, hold on. I got to catch up. Yeah. So Jeff, the short and sweet is look at lots and lots of art.
Right.
So that's pretty much the short and sweet of what I was saying, right? And Marcus says, so yeah, even Kirby art has different inkers. Yeah, exactly. So you can recognize Kirby, but he has worked with different inkers. So it's a question of recognizing, if you look at enough Kirby stuff, and you always then like look at it first, look at the art first, flip through the comics first, let's say, and only after you flip through it, right, then go back to the credits page and just see who did it, right? But always let your eyes absorb the information first. And when you get into that habit, I have no doubt that you will then soon start to realize, you'll look at a page and let's say on CAF or whatever, and you'll be, it's obviously Kirby, and I'm pretty sure it's Joe Sinnott, because you'll just be so used to how the inks look on those Kirby pages versus how the Vince Coletta ink pages look, because it's a wildly different appearance, you know.
Sure.
Even though you can recognize the underdrawing is by Kirby.
Right.
So that's it. So I would say just always look, absorb the information first, and then go and check the credits to see who did it. You know, that's the best way to do it, I think. CJ also says the same thing. Yeah, read an ass load of comics or look at art, you know. And David's in 16 hours away from us, telling you a great question. So
thanks, David.
And Mark is saying that a Sinnott versus what I just said, a Coletta makes a difference. Exactly. Even Royer inking, which is closer to the Sinnott style than the Coletta style. So yes, Maki Pupu brings out a artist that I don't think anybody has ever mentioned on the show. Stephen Baskerville is very detailed. Okay. Let's see. Okay, so you're having your personal conversation there about favorite Texera has, but not the thing is, Maki Pupu, is that Jason is referring particularly to not the penciler, because he already has been able to learn and recognize different sort of penciling styles. He's asking more about specifically the inkers. How do you know, because he sees a lot of us saying, we can look at a page and immediately know this guy inked it, or that guy inked it, or this person inked it, and that's more what he's specifically asking about. He still hasn't gotten to that point where he can immediately recognize inkers' styles, right? So it's the same thing, Jason. It's like even inkers, not all of them, but some of them do have their own sort of style. In other words, like I said, the way they lay down their stroke, the way they put a stroke down of the ink, you'll start to recognize that hand stroke, the way it looks as it comes off their pen. And you, like I said, you see enough of it, eventually it starts to click with you,
What do you think gives an inker away? Is it their figure work? Is it a face?
Because don't forget, like most of the figure work is done by the penciler.
Right.
And these days, like in the last, I would say, entire generation, 30 years, whatever, the industry changed a lot to where up until the 80s, pencilers used to pencil, for the most part, more loosely. Like everything you needed was there, but it wasn't super tight like some guys do, where, you're seeing some art these days where like it's not, the pencils don't get inked, right?
Right.
And it's like beautiful, precise, tight finished pencils where you look at it and you're like, you don't even need to ink it, because you could probably just publish it like this, because there's no stray sketchy lines on the sides or, on the edges or coming off the edge. Nothing. It's just tight, clean, So that's the thing, is that up until throughout the 80s and before, nobody penciled that way. It wasn't done.
Sure.
The idea was always leave it open to an extent to allow the inker to put a little bit of their own sort of style into it, But then, like I said, things changed from the 90s onward. A lot of pencilers got into the habit of thinking, well, if I don't like this, if I don't like the guy they're going to assign me as inker, right? Then one way to ensure that this inker I don't want inking me will not ruin my pencils, right?
Yeah.
Is if I can just go in and tighten the hell out of my pen. I'll just, as long as I can meet my deadline, I'm going to draw as tightly as I humanly possibly can. Because when you draw that tightly, there's really nothing that the inker can contribute other than essentially tracing over what's already there.
Right.
You
Right.
understand? They can't sort of add their own flair because they can't erase what's there. It's too tight, you know?
Yeah.
And so that's basically it. But you know, some guys do have a particular style. You know, you look like a guy. I don't know if you're familiar with his work. His name is Danny Mickey. Okay,
I know the name, but I can't say I'm familiar.
Okay, so I bring him up because a good example in the sense that he has done a lot of inking over David Finch. Now, David Finch is a very high detail type penciler, right? And he's done a lot of inking over him. And what I noticed over the years is after inking him so much is that when Mickey would then suddenly go on to someone else, it could be like somebody with a completely different style, penciling style, like I think like a Mark Bagley, let's say, okay, completely different approach to David Finch. Yet you look at it and you can tell, like, I'm like, oh shit, it looks like, is that Mickey who inked this? Because I guess when you've inked the same penciler for so long, right, and you've got and you know, David Finch is also a very tight penciler for the most part. You end up picking up his line art, the way he does his lines, right? You ink them the way he drew them.
Mm-hmm.
So you do that long enough, and it's muscle memory. It becomes muscle memory. So suddenly you jump onto a different penciler. You're bound. Your muscle memory is still there, and you will still lay down certain lines the way you did with the other pencil.
Previous, sure.
You know what I mean? And that's why, and that's how you start to recognize, okay, Mickey has a kind of distinct style. And it is kind of like what I say, like it's very David Finch-ish style. And it makes sense because he's inked him so much. You know?
Sure.
So that's kind of a good example for that. And Marcus says that you can always ignore the inker if you wanted an example. Oh, okay. I'm coming into missing. Sorry. Not really getting what you're saying here. If you wanted an example, you could ignore the inker. Okay, I don't know. You'll clear it up for us. I know you always do, Marcus. Jeff, so you start to recognize the hatching styles, right? Line weights, Wood's command of shadow. Exactly. Yeah. It's again, it's just the more you look, those are all the things that you start to recognize. And it's not a purposeful thing. It just starts to happen the more you look at it. And like I said, what's really key, I find, is as you look at the art, look at the art first. Let your eye absorb the information and then send it to the brain. And then, if you don't know who inked it, then you go and check the credit, and that helps you more, I find, ultimately start to sort of, because it's a way to test yourself. You'll eventually start realizing, oh, I kind of was thinking it might be that person, and that's how you start to get that recognition factor start to kick in more often,
Comic art flashcards.
It's like, did somebody say that, or are you saying that?
No, I'm saying that.
Okay.
Just
it's almost like
little flashcards that have the artists.
Yeah. Kirby sending a Kirby is something else. It really is. Yep. He inks too. Maki Poo Poo, who are you talking about? What penciler were you to? Oh, maybe Finch you were talking about?
I think that was Teixeira.
Teixeira? Okay. Austin makes anyone look good. Yes, Rickster, but I will say, like with any rule, I always say this, that there are exceptions, but whatever, as long as there are exceptions. Because I've seen some exceptions to the rule where it was like, ooh, wow, I can't believe Austin. Yeah, I would rather not have Austin on, so it happens to everybody, right? But again, exceptions, but primarily for the most part, he has always made people look pretty darn good. Rick, I don't know if you remember, good example. There was a, I don't know if he did interiors, but definitely there was a cover of Conan the Barbarian that Buscema from the Buscema run, right? That Buscema did, but Terry Austin of all people inked it, and that's like a completely different approach to inking, than Buscema's pencils. So you would think, oh man, that's not going to work. And while I'll say, I would never purposely, after seeing that, I would never want him to be Buscema's regular inker, okay, because it is a little too, it doesn't fit quite right. It was still quite lovely. Like I was like, oh, it's different. It's just a nice, cool, different look. You could still recognize that it was Buscema, but simultaneously knowing immediately that it was Austin. So very interesting, and yes, nice, but still more of a curiosity thing where I would not want him to be Buscema's regular inker, as I say, you know. But yeah, but I appreciate you mentioning that, because it is true. There's some inkers that are just so good that they can make almost anybody look good. Yeah, Marcus says that you're kind of looking at the finish of the inks, the polish. Polish, maybe not in some cases, like for example, slicker inkers, you know. But that's what he's basically saying, is that on some art you will look and you will start to realize that, wow, the ink looks like it's what you would describe as slick, meaning the lines are really smooth, right? It looks like it's like long, slick lines of like a river of ink was splashed down. Whereas as opposed to some other inkers may lay it down in ways where it looks rougher, you know? But yeah, that's you know, some guys are slicker, some guys are less slick and rougher and more textural is the way to put what I mean by rough stuff, you know, and how it affects mood. Yeah, exactly. Spawn. Yeah, I mean, although the inking on that is was Mickey inking that? He was inking. Who was he inking on that? Was that the Angel Medina stuff or the Tony Daniel maybe? I don't remember. Tony Daniel. I was not a Spawn fan, so I forget these things. But let's see. Okay. Thank you, Marcus. If you ignore the inking, right. Okay, Nick, sorry if I missed you. You've already left 4 minutes ago, but thank you, sir. I appreciate it. Yeah, thanks. Have a good one. And yeah, but you see, the thing is, it's funny, right? Because like Sienkiewicz for me has always been like an exception in terms of as an inker, right? Like I love Sienkiewicz. I've always loved Sienkiewicz. So here's Mark, and I think you can tell me, Marcus, if you agree with this. Like I think you probably will. So when you're talking about a guy like Sienkiewicz, where he is a brilliant artist in his own right with an incredibly obvious style, right? And he's a guy where when he inks just like he draws, so it looks the same, right? I prefer, like, it's funny. I find it interesting to see how his incredibly strong style would always look over pencilers who they themselves have their own very obvious penciling style, right? So as an example, when he did those issues of Wolverine over John Buscema, I was like, oh, wow, this is so cool. Because it's like, I love John Buscema too. So I love the penciler. I love the guy who's, I don't call him an inker because, you know, he's obviously an artist, but he did a lot of just inking. But as I say, right, it looks exactly like when he pencils and inks himself. So for me, I love it, but more as a curiosity. You know, I love to see it because I love both the penciler and the inker. But, you know, for an issue or two or whatever, you know, it's fine, right? It's fun. But if you gave me the choice for a long-term run on a title, then I would be more, you know, I'd be more hesitant to want that. Because what happens is, as much as I love Sienkiewicz, I don't want him overpowering the Buscema pencils, you see, because I want to still see more of Buscema style show through. So it's okay for like fill-in issues here and there. But I love, you know, it's interesting you say that. And I have a friend who hates Sienkiewicz. But I loved it. To me, I feel he enhanced Sal's spectacular Spider-Man run. I feel like, and I was always a Sal fan, you know, but I feel like he took it to the next level and just juiced it up. He just jazzed it up and added a little something extra. And I felt like it still was Sal's clearly obvious work, except with more fanciful decoration, if you will. So I loved it. But again, yes, I'm aware that some people sometimes are like, oh yeah, no, you know, I get it, right? But what I will say, Marcus, is that I like when guys who are like, let's say, pencilers, like Sienkiewicz or Neil Adams, which Rick is talking about, when those kinds of guys decide to do inking jobs, I really, really love it most when they ink guys who never had a visibly outward style. So what do I mean by that? I'll name some examples so you know what I'm talking about. Guys who where you know, if you didn't know already that they did the issues from this run on this title, you wouldn't really know for sure just by looking at the art that it was them. So guys who I'm talking about from back in the 70s and 80s would be guys like Ed Hannigan, Ron Wilson, who else? Early Dan Jurgens. You know, that's a good enough sample, you know, just sort of give you an example of what I mean. Let me know if you agree. When I would see somebody like a Dan Jurgens early on, or Ed Hannigan especially, that's a great example. And Ed Hannigan was a great layout artist, right? He could tell a story. Hannigan, you could tell a story, but a lot of guys could tell stories. So when you're telling a story, it's as long as it's clear, well, you're not going to really notice that you're telling a great story.
Right.
It's just clear and it's doing the effective job that it needs to do. It's not stopping you, making you go like, whoa, like how do you go from this panel to that panel? It's flowing nicely, so you just keep going. But his pencils didn't ever have a particular style. There was nothing that Hannigan did with his you know, the way the pencil mark would come off the pencil, the way he'd flick his wrist or whatever, or any particular cross hatching style or feathering style that he did that would make you go immediately, oh, that's Ed Hannigan, you know? Mm-hmm. So to me, that's what I would call those kind of guys. I always refer to those guys as pencilers with generic styles, you know, and not as a put down,
right?
You know, it's just simply a way to describe guys who there's nothing about their penciling style that immediately tells you it's them, you know? Mm-hmm. And so in those cases, that's when I really, really appreciated an issue that would come out and it'd be like an inker who they did have a strong style, you know? I mean, I don't know, Jason, you haven't been around long enough. I don't think that you'd probably be very familiar, if at all, with the Filipino inkers, even though you did mention previously Alfredo Alcala, for example.
Right.
Yeah, Rickster, exactly. Chuck Patton, exactly. Keith Pollard, thank you, Rick, exactly. Those are exactly the same guys I always lumped in. That's precisely them. If you didn't know already that they had done runs on those specific titles, you just don't know it's them, you know? Oh no, Tariq. No. I know Milgrom when he's penciling, and I can see Milgrom when he's inking. Oh no, he's not generic. I know him for sure. But maybe you just got to get a little more used to him. I don't know. But and yes, exactly, Marcus. I remember the good old days of the broken logos. That was cool stuff. Good designer. That's the thing, and that's why they hired him back in the 80s as a cover designer. And that's the thing, is a lot of us fans, we still don't even know just how many covers from the 80s. A lot of the credit to the look of it goes to Ed Hannigan, because he never got credit on the cover or inside the book, but he's the one who laid out the covers and handed the layouts to whoever the final penciler was, you know? Oh yeah, throughout the 80s, he was a very, very busy guy doing the cover layouts. So, and nobody knows, but it was him, you know? So yeah, so that's the thing. Yeah, here we put it up there. Keith Pollard, Chuck Patton. Well, I don't know if it's funny. I'm just saying. For me, yeah, man, if you've been around like since the 80s, and when Milgrom, when he was in his heyday. Listen, I love Al. He's a good guy. Look, the reality is, you guys, I always say, I don't want to bullshit, okay? Even though sometimes you got to look, if we want to have, I want to have truthful conversation, honest conversation. Sometimes we have to mention not everything in the hobby is fantastic. Not every piece of art ever drawn was brilliant, whatever.
Right.
And you guys who were around in the 80s, I think most of you know, you remember, if it was anything like me, where I came from, you'd be at the comic shop and you'd look at the latest issue of whatever title and you'd be like, oh, God, no. Oh, the inking, Milgrom. Oh, he was universally hated. Nobody wanted to see him inking a book. That's just how it was. Unless, again, here come the exception to the rule of things, unless it was inking Starlin. For whatever reason, he usually did a pretty nice job inking Starlin. But even there are exceptions. And I might as well just bring it up because I don't know, you guys, and maybe even you, Jason, you might have noticed. I don't know. For those of you who follow like Jim Starlin art when it comes out at auction and stuff, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but those pages that have been auctioning recently from the Marvel Fanfare, the 2-part Marvel Fanfare story, I believe it's 20 and 21, the Hulk and the Thing. I bought them when they came out. And even then, as a, I don't know, 12, 13-year-old or whatever, even then I was like, Starlin, yeah. But I'm like, why, Al? Why did you put such a heavy hand, like Marcus is saying here? In those 2 issues, it's clear that it's a stronger Milgrom influence and slightly less Starlin. But it could have been just a heavy hand, or this is what we don't know. I haven't looked at the credits. Is it possible Starlin himself, agreed to do the job, only like on the premise that, okay, as long as I'm not going to do full pencils, I'll maybe just do kind of like layouts, breakdowns, or whatever. Then it's understandable why it would look more Milgromish, But yeah, I don't know what, like I said, what the credits are. So Tariq. So I was going to mention Milgrom on Starlin. I much rather see Starlin on Starlin. Oh, sure. Or lay Aloha on Starlin. Sure, I get it, and most people agree. Although Tariq, don't brush off Al's work on Starlin like altogether, because if you take the time to actually peek into the Starlin stuff from the 70s they did together, right, which you'll see usually credited or signed as Gemini, okay, which, if for those of you who don't know, that's a little play on words for Jim and I, Jim Starlin and Al Milgrom. You didn't know that?
I learned something new.
Okay, excellent. That's what I love about these shows. There you go. But did you remember ever seeing the Gemini on any Starlin books?
I'm trying to think if I do or not.
Okay, well, if it doesn't,
sure I did.
Yeah, if it doesn't come to mind, it might have been something you might have seen and you just didn't even think twice of what does that mean? I don't know, whatever, Who cares? And you moved on, right? But yeah, next time, if you in the future, when you look at some older Starlin stuff with Il Milgrom, you'll see Gemini, and that's what it means, Gemini. So CJ, it's funny, I was looking at my Strange Tales Warlock early Starlin saying, oh my, he really changed. What do you mean, like later on he changed from that stuff? I think that's what you mean. Okay, there you go. Dropping some knowledge. Yeah, there you go. I'm glad. It's fun, right? It's fun to learn these little tidbits. I always thought when I learned that, I was like, oh, that's so cool, So, and see, in his case, Tariq always wondered what Gemini meant. So he had already been seeing the Gemini symbol or whatever, I think it's the word in the circle. I think it's usually how they did it. But
so is there a artist inker combination that you find so unappealing that you wouldn't want that in your collection, or you would just say, okay, that's what this combination looks like, and I'll collect it, but I don't like it, but I wanted an example of it. But is there a combination that you'd say, I don't even want to touch that? It's so
God. Honestly, I think the honest answer is probably that there are so many. I can't even think of one off the top of my head.
Sure.
Because there's probably so many. Yeah, I absolutely. Oh, I mean, I can certainly say I remember countless times throughout the last 25 years where a piece of art comes in front of me and I'm looking at it and I'm like, oh yeah, cool, so and so. And I'm like, yeah, but the inking, yeah, forget it. You know?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And I know that I'm not the only one by a long shot in this hobby who would pass on a page because they don't like the finishes.
I think I see that more with modern art than I would like 60s and 70s art.
Really?
Well, maybe that's just me.
No. But that makes sense, right? Because think about it. We all know that for the 60s and 70s art, the bulk of that stuff gets purchased primarily due to nostalgic reasons.
True.
Right.
True.
So a lot of the people today that were kids back then who are fans of it and still buying the art today, a lot of the fans I've noticed, their eyes are so clouded by the rose-colored glasses that they've never taken off over the years. It's obvious that it's nostalgia pulling them in, because I look back at a lot of that stuff and I'm like, wow, a lot of that stuff I used to think was, great back when I was 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 8. I look back at it now with the benefit of another quarter century's worth of purposeful learning about illustration, right?
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I see the flaws I never used to see back then. And so it makes me kind of like, I'm like, oh, that didn't age as well as I remembered it being,
Right.
But again, who am I to tell somebody else? Like if they still see what they saw when they were kids, hey, more power to you. Buy what you want,
Right.
Like, I'm not going to name any names, but I have a friend who's like that. You can't really tell the difference between like a good example of this artist or a not so good one of this artist. And I remember having a conversation. I was like, we were talking about George Pérez, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I was stating how, boy, if you look at his entire body of work, I mean, to me, for interiors, the best thing I remember seeing would be probably there was a couple of issues of New Teen Titans in the first series, the 1980 series, plus I believe the first 2 issues of the Baxter series, the 1984 series, where he inked himself. And to me, it's the best he's ever looked for interiors. And then if you want to talk covers, I mean, almost any cover of that time period would fall, like tons of covers from that from the mid 80s. As long as he was inking himself, that's the best stuff, right? But my friend, we're talking, and I was saying that out loud, right, to somebody, and he goes, "Really?" And I'm like, I'm equally shocked. I'm like, "Yeah, like, you don't like that stuff?" And he's like, No, it's fine or whatever. But again, keep in mind he's also a Marvel guy, so that could affect how people. It does affect how people think when you're talking about a company, right? The publisher that you're not a big fan of. It affects how you look at the art, on a subconscious level, right? But not just that. But I said, well, what do you think was the best thing he ever did? And he goes, Avengers, without batting an eye. And I go. And I go, the 1998 series, really? Inked by Alvey? And I'm like, I mean, it's fine, but it's not as good as, it's nowhere near as good as those Titans issues that I mentioned. And he goes, what? No, I'm talking about the 70s. And I'm like, the 70s? Oh, God. That's like the worst George Pérez stuff. If you have the ability to separate yourself from the nostalgia,
right?
He was learning his way. That stuff looks so archaic. Not only the penciling, the inking, like it, it's still cool and fun to look at, right? And for the time, he was ahead of the game, of course, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But to look at it as talking about the man's overall body of work from 1973 or 4, when they started, all the way into the 2010s, and to say that you think the 70s, everything was downhill for you since the 70s, it's just preposterous, absolutely preposterous. And that tells me that's the first sign that, okay, you know nothing about art. I'm not trying to be mean, but you know nothing about art. You clearly can't separate from your nostalgia and objectively look at art. You know what I mean?
Right.
So I find that fascinating. And again, I want to make it clear to everybody watching who's like, oh, what are you putting down my 70s Pérez pages or whatever? I'm not putting them down. I'm just being honest about, if we're talking strictly on talent and technical skill of illustration, that stuff is very weak compared to some of the stuff he did later on. And yes, nostalgia combined with lack of artistic knowledge is what clouds you to be able to see that. But again, I'm not saying you shouldn't buy it. If you buy it for 100% nostalgic reasons, or if you think it's great art, by all means, like I'm not here to try to convince you. I'm telling you the facts, but I don't want to convince you. If you don't believe what I just said, I don't care. Believe what you want, absolutely. Buy what you want to, right? So that's it. But we were talking again, I brought that up because we're talking about the whole concept of pencilers and how an inker can change the way the final product looks, right? And then again, it goes hand in hand with how, technical abilities. Now you want to talk about how something truly, what's good or what's not so good. There's different levels of, again, the whole thing about not buying a page because an inker, but come on, Rick. I know, okay, it's cool. I appreciate the constant last name puns that you do. I love them. But you come on, somebody's got out there. You got to understand what I'm saying is true. And I am not a nostalgia denier. Even I and it's funny. Chuck, hey Chuck, good to see you, dude. Jakin says, no, nostalgia is good nostalgia. There you go. See, it gets in the way. It does get in the way of you learning, more about what's better and what's not as good. Rick, so I feel like Bob Smith is underrated. Always like this thing. You know what though, Rick? I just want to make a quick comment about that. In that I remember we were talking about the pencilers who had the generic styles. I actually always felt that there's a group of inkers who also they had generic styles where you couldn't really tell it was them because they essentially just followed the penciler's work to a T, which is nice because that's what the penciler usually prefers most of the time anyways, right? Follow my lines as much as possible, make it look like me, right? But I always felt he was like that. If I'm not mistaken, was he Bob Smith? He was one of the guys who inked Colin at DC. Is that the guy I'm thinking? Because I think I always used to confuse Bob Smith with Bob Kemp. And I think Bob Kemp was the guy inking Buscema on Conan the Barbarian in the 80s, right? But I think Bob Smith inked maybe Colin, I don't know, on Gem, some Son of Saturn and stuff like that. I don't know. Let me know. But Marcus, quietly inked or no inks? Do you have any opinion on that, Jason? Are you a quietly fan at all?
Well, the only quietly I know is when he was doing the X-Men, the new X-Men stuff that was in the, what was it, late 90s, early 2000s. And
yes,
and it was not my favorite. I don't know if it's because I didn't like that part of the story, the run, and so I'm jading the art.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Not a big fan in general, anyways. Right.
Yeah.
Marcus, I would like to say that it. So the thing about it's hard to say really, because for me, I'm not like a massive fan of his. Like he was not an artist who I ever sort of sought out. Oh, I want to see more Quietly stuff, you know. But I do enjoy the style when it does, pass in front of me, you know. The only thing I will say is that it's not just a Quietly thing. It's just sort of generally speaking. I still prefer, no matter what, I still prefer any penciler to be inked. Yeah, I prefer seeing the finished art. Certainly, from a collecting standpoint, I prefer having finished art with inks. You know, the pencils, because they're gray, they just don't pop out at me enough. I like to study the penciled work. Okay, this is where I separate with the penciled stuff. I like to study it, but as a collector, to collect the art, I prefer to not buy and own the penciled work by itself. With few exceptions, because I know you guys are going to say, Grummett, you're going to start screaming at me. You have Grummett pencils in your gallery. Yes, whatever. A few exceptions, whatever. Okay, but for the most part, I prefer to see the ink.
I really like pencils, though. I think sometimes they can be, like you were pointing out, some of the newer guys, or maybe guys that don't want the inker to go off on their own. Really tight pencils are pretty cool, I think, sometimes.
Again, I just want to reiterate, just so I'm clear, in case I wasn't clear. I do not only I love to look at pencils. I do love to look at pencils, because you think of it this way, it's the only way, the only opportunity, if you will, that we as fans have to see what did this look like before it got finished by the inker, right? In most cases throughout history, we don't really know what the art looked like before the inker got to it. We really don't, right? So I love the opportunity to see the pencils. I really do. I'm just saying I don't love it enough to want to then own it.
Sure.
I'm just indifferent about it, is all I'm saying.
Yeah.
To own it, see, because I can study it for free. See, the pencils I can study for free online. There's plenty of it out there that I can look at in other people's collections, right? And so that's it. That's really what I like about it. I just want to study it and see how he did his pencils, right, or her. But I just don't feel this pull to need to own them. And therefore, when it comes to collecting, yeah, I would rather buy the inks. I don't know if that makes sense to you, but that's just how I feel.
Yeah, I mean, like in the wall behind me, the top are all pencils, and they don't pop off the wall like the inks do. But the penciled pages up there are the ones that I'd fight you for, and you can have the rest.
Sorry, which would you fight me for?
The penciled pages.
Oh, okay. What? Okay.
In that case, and that might just be because of subject matter and all that stuff. A penciled page of some mundane thing, obviously not going to be as exciting. But
hi to you, Dwayne Zapane. Good to see you, man. So here's the thing, Jason. The thing about it is, again, you think about this, okay? What I feel is, I understand what you're saying, and I in principle, I agree with that view, and I understand it and agree with it, right?
Sure.
But here's another sort of curveball, if you will, in that I also feel that a part, and it's impossible for me to get into your head. I don't know how much of a part, whether it's 10%, 20%, whatever, right? But in some part, at least, I also do feel that a good part of the reason you feel that way about those particular pages is because you never knew them as anything other than unfinished pencils.
True. Yeah.
Right.
You're right.
Right. So I guess my point to that is, let's say John had decided to do this personal project of his the way he did it, but also going as far as to finish it with inks.
Right.
And all you had ever seen was finished pages,
Inks.
right? There was no such thing as penciled versions, right? You would be just, if not more excited, I think.
True.
Right. To have discovered those pages, and you would have been dying to go buy yourself some for sure.
No,
I think
you're right. You're right.
Yeah. And I think if it had happened that way, I will also posit the theory that perhaps if we then found out after you saw a bunch of those inked pages, you heard that, oh look, he had some unfinished ones because he redrew them. He wasn't happy with them, so he's got a few here that didn't make it into the story, and these are just pencils. I think you would then be happy and interested to sort of, oh, that's interesting, from the curiosity factor of, oh, look, a few rare pages where I can see how his pencils look without the inks on them, right?
Yeah.
And I think you'd be interested in that. Although I also would posit the theory that because at that in that hypothetical scenario, the penciled only pages would be very rare, right? They would be the exception rather than the rule. I would posit that you would probably be more apt to still want to just get some of the ink pages, because those are the ones that are, I mean, they're all inked, they're finished pages, while that penciled one only is more like, again, I think you would be, oh, cool to look at, but these are finished.
Right.
That's what I think. I could be wrong, though. I could be wrong.
Yeah, no, I get that. I get that argument, and I think you're probably right. If I had seen him in the finished way first, yeah, you're right. It probably would have been more appealing that way. I think Tariq's comment though nails it. Inks jump out at you, and pencils draw you in. Because when you're looking at the pencils, you're really like staring and looking to see where the lines went and stuff like that. And
it's the process.
Yeah, and the process, and the inks just bam, there it is. There's your thing.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, that kind of pretty much is another way of saying what I said before about how, because the pencils allow you to see the process before it's been finished, right? That's what I mean when I say I like to study the pencils. You know, it gives me that opportunity, like you just said, to see how they did it, how they laid down the lines. And you can see how, you know, some guys are tighter or looser than others. So some guys are super tight, like you said, right? And it's finished. You can publish it like that without inking it. Other guys are looser. They're more open. So you see extraneous pencil strokes that, you know, if it gets inked, you can tell which strokes are not going to be inked. They will be erased after the inking is completed, you know? So again, it's about studying for me. Whereas as a collector, when it comes to owning, I prefer to own the inks because I just love the jet black ink. The way it's so like smacks you in the face, you know? You know, and I mean, look, we're all looking behind you at the pieces on the wall, and that's what stands out. Whereas at the top,
it fades out.
It's just, I don't see anything there. I know it's some kind of penciled work, but it's something that I would have to ask you, hey, tell me about that. What's up there? And depending on what you tell me, I'd be like, oh, can I take a closer look? And you maybe, you know, but whereas the other stuff, it's like, oh yeah, I can see Wolverine there. And because you just see the black pop out and the contrast between the white on the page and the black ink, right?
Right.
So that's it. So I wanted to get also to Chuck, because Chuck, I know, is going to say something about this. So we're going back to Frank Quitely. So Quitely creates his pencils for reproduction. Exactly. He's one of those guys where it doesn't need to be inked. Essentially inking with his pencils. Right. It's finished. It's tight and finished. It's precise. Very precise. So that's exactly it. So they're considered finished, I think. Yeah. For reproduction, they just add contrast. Absolutely. Perfectly well said. Couldn't say it better. That's exactly it. And the same can be said for, you know, some of those other pencilers. I don't know, Jason, if you're familiar with Dale Eaglesham's work.
A little bit from your shows. I mean,
say again.
from your shows, when you've been selling some pieces. Yeah.
Okay, sure. Yeah, so he has, over the years done pencils that other people either ink on Blueline or that just got published as pencils because he did them so tight. It just beautiful, tight lines with nice, soft side of the lead shading,
Mm-hmm.
and yeah, it's beautiful to look at. But again, from a collecting standpoint, I don't want it because it just doesn't pop. It doesn't have that bang in your face pop that I like the black ink to have, Yeah, so that's it. So Tariq says, oh, yeah, that's the one that he said before. And of course, so CJ agrees exactly. So I think we're all pretty much in agreement with that. And Chuck says, so whatever was in the story is what the art is, right? So this is all production art, not gallery. Well, yes, that's another conversation entirely, right? Yes, you are absolutely right, exactly. And but Rick, inks are so final. When you say it that way, you make it sound like that's not a good thing. But I think it's just the way you wrote it. I think that's a good thing, right? You like it, right, Rick? You like that. The inked product it's finished because it really is. It's you've finished it, right? It's dark enough and it just has that. It's finished now, right? I'm assuming that's what you mean. And Chuck says that Dale Eaglesham's pencils on FF are beautiful. Yeah, precisely. And that's what I'm saying about. Yeah, for me, it's all I'm saying. It's not a knock at all on the quality of the work or that it doesn't look pretty to look at or beautiful even, right? Pencils only, I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
It's simply for me personally, not talking about anybody else other than me, to have to pay the good money that we pay for this stuff and own it. I just personally feel I can save the money and put it into the finished inked art and do all the studying I want of the pencils for free online. It's good enough for me. That's all I'm saying, Jason.
Right. So then that dirty word Blueline.
Oh, God. I do really want to talk about that. And thank you for confirming, Rick. Thank you. Appreciate it. And you only own very few pencils. Oh, and Stanley. Hey, Stanley. I agree with Ruben. Pencils are interesting, but not visually appealing. Yeah, and believe me, it's not just a me thing. A lot of people, I can tell you, feel the same way. That's just how it is. And in most cases, again, there's always exceptions to the rule, right? But in general, the penciled only art doesn't bring typically as much money because the demand is not quite there as much as it is for the inked art,
Sure.
Yeah. So that's it. Oh, and I can tell you that from not only a collector standpoint, speaking to other collectors, I tell you this also from a dealer standpoint, having had to sell penciled only pieces in the past versus inked pieces. Absolutely always have trouble selling the pencils only pieces. And no, guys, don't bring up guys like Whiteley. He's a big superstar name. Of course, that's an exception to the rule. I'm talking in general, okay? So a guy like Eaglesham, okay? I have had Eaglesham covers that were fully finished and inked by Andrew Hennessy, and I sold them no problem. I've had beautiful, tight, penciled covers that were never inked because they just published it. They colored it off the pencils, right, and published it that way. And even with a lot of popular characters, Wolverine, Iron Man, Spider-Man, Captain America on the same cover. And I had a hell of a time. It took a long time to sell. And I realized it's because people like the look of the beautiful pencils, but not enough to want to own it because they would rather still see jet black inks.
Yeah.
And I can tell you absolutely without a doubt, when I finally sold the piece, it sold for significantly less than I sold his penciled and inked covers.
Sure. Yeah.
So that's it. So Tariq, so you picked up your first Eaglesham piece from Nikki B. Okay, cool. Looked great in person. Good. Excellent. Yeah, as long as you love it, you pick up shit you love. You can never go wrong, you know. They don't scan well for online. I mean, it depends on the person too, though, and how much effort you put into it. I will admit, it's trickier. It's trickier. It definitely, the scanner light sort of warps the look of it, if you will. I don't mean warping like, you know, the lines, but yeah, it's hard. It's trickier to make good scans of penciled. It is for sure. But having said that, Marcus, if you make an effort, if it's still a good scan, it's more than good enough for my purposes, just to be happy enough to study the penciled work online on the screen. Yeah, I don't, you know, I don't have a problem with that, you know. So that's it. But Jason, let me just ask you, because I don't know how serious you were being, but is that something that you wanted to touch upon in specific, the whole Blueline thing, or you just wanted to sort of bring up something funny that everybody hates?
Yeah, no, I was poking the bear a little bit because, like you pointed out, with some of the more modern artists now, you've got them doing pencils someplace else, and then they'll scan it, and then the inker's some other location, and they're going to do the inks on a separate board, you know. And so, are you collecting the inker? Are you collecting the penciler? Or are you collecting both together? You know.
Yeah, that's a whole ball of wax that we've not only done before, but like
just poking the bear. Just poking the bear.
Yeah, I think we'll save that for a future date, because I don't mind getting into that, but it'll.
Oh yeah, no.
Like everybody does this and it goes long, which I don't mind, but we at this point only have like a 43 minutes left.
Right.
No,
I don't want to. I was just poking the bear.
Yeah. Given that it's, you know, we're all on Super Bowl weekend, we're probably going to want to just go and just relax with the game after, whatever. I don't want to get everybody worked up, and I certainly don't want to get worked up myself. You know? But yeah, we'll save it for another time. Johnny McCloskey, holy shit, the claim jumper himself, the original claim jumper himself, has popped into the chat. Wow. Very long time no see, Johnny. I'm becoming an ink snob. I like the classic India inks and don't love the mark. Okay.
That's true.
Well, Johnny, listen. I'm glad you appreciate it. Listen, let's yeah, and you know, you Jason, you immediately you knew what he's talking about, and you agreed. I don't think there's really no worries, Johnny, no worries. I like to rag on people. Everybody knows that. Yeah, let me put it up here for you. Yeah, I don't think that there's really anybody who would. I mean, okay, again, there's always exceptions. Let's not talk about those people. But I don't think, generally speaking, there's anybody who would ever disagree that they would, in most instances, if possible, if they had a choice, that they would rather have their pages inked, you know, with artists who use India ink, actual India ink, either out of a bottle, although that's, you know, out of a bottle is typically only the guys who are brush inkers, of which there are not many people. Most of them use a variety of different nibs or brush pens, you know, where the ink is already built in or whatever. But even brush pens and markers, you can get quality stuff these days where the ink on the page looks pretty rich and, you know, maybe not super thick like it came out of a bottle necessarily, but rich and dark enough where you're like, nice, like this is nice, you know. And even though you can tell by the hand strokes, right, you can tell that, oh, it's a marker with a thick tipped edge. You can tell, right, oftentimes what the tool was. And I think most people would agree with that. Like I think an easier way of saying it, Johnny, would be to say the opposite, that I really dislike it when I want to get a piece, I track it down, and this, of course, it tends to apply more often than not on contemporary stuff, although some older stuff as well. And you track it down, and then you find out, you look at it, and you're like, oh God, it's markers. and you're upset because you can tell not only is it markers, but the reason you know it's markers is because it's those old, like, and I don't mean the faded stuff. It's not because it necessarily faded, because in many cases it didn't fade or it didn't turn purple, reddish, maroonish colored. It's still black. It's just that it's a very light black, a very sort of like it was mixed with grays or whatever black. You know what I mean? Like, it didn't fade, but it's just ever since it was inked, because of the crappy type marker that was used, it always, from the first day it was inked, it was always going to look kind of like a faded black, you know? So I think most people, given a choice, would rather have richer looking dark inks than more faded looking stuff. Here's the thing, and Jason, you can tell me. Let me ask you first: are you a Mike Mignola fan at all?
Yeah, I like some of his work a lot, and
okay,
the Hellboy stuff is cool.
Okay, do you like more content? Okay, so let's just define contemporary. So, do you like his stuff, any of his stuff from post 1990, or because there are I bring that up because there are guys who only like his Hulk stuff and before the 80s stuff. But do you like that stuff that he's done on Hellboy and from that era?
Yeah, I do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. But what I often hear, and I'm in agreement with this because I've owned some of it myself, and even guys who love Mignola, like love Mignola, right? Even some of those guys have told me, like, ugh, I hate the fact that he waters down his ink so much. And he's been doing it for decades. It's like all his originals, if you look at them, yeah, that's the thing. The ink is so watered down. It's like, it's just frustrating. I just want to see it more black. But it's really like it's like he's trying to watercolor paint the page rather than ink it, you know?
Yeah, it has that quality to it.
Yeah.
More of a watercolor. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I like the watercolor look for inks, but more if you were doing it as a sort of special technique. I kind of got tired of it when I saw that, like, okay, everything he does is pretty much like that, you know? And it's kind of like, so for print, it's okay because it's still, you know, they still get it to print black, right? Yeah. And that's okay. But when I see the originals, I'm disappointed because I feel it's just so watery. It's too watery. And, you know, sometimes it looks lovely, but other times it's just, I think it's too much. He does it all the time. And so it's just, I never see Mignola with slick, black, deep, rich inks, you know? And that's right. I think, kind of what it bugs me, you know?
Right.
And Johnny's saying, so I see what you mean, but at least there aren't any thick chisel markers. Okay, yeah. I mean, exactly. No, I agree. I would still take the watered down inking style of, let's say, Mignola over those inked pieces where you see a lot of those, the fact, like I said before, where you can see that it was a thick, rectangular tipped marker, right? When you see like the background, they had to fill in the background real quick because it's a lot of black ink you got to put in. And they got to do this basically. You know, so of course, the quickest way to do it is by using the fattest, thickest marker available. And yeah, unfortunately, when it's the crappier quality markers where the ink isn't very black, then the more you're going to see the individual separation of each ink stroke, right? Like every quarter inch or whatever, or eighth of an inch. Yeah, more like an eighth of an inch. You'll see the stripes of the ink here. Oh man, yeah, that's kind of like, yeah. It just doesn't look pretty on an original, right?
Right.
So yeah, there you go. Exactly. Yeah, you totally agree. Of course, that's what it is.
Yeah, you'd like those big blacks to be filled in with a nice brush where it just all kind of blends deep.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, if you're a brush user, like I said, most inkers are not brush users. Although a lot of guys know that the collectors prefer. A lot of the artists know how the collectors prefer to see the art, and they will tailor with the tools they use for that, because they want to be able to sell the art and not have these collectors complain like, oh, about the inking or how you did the inking, you know. And so even guys, most of the inkers who use a variety of pens, even they will have brushes and ink bottles on hand simply for nothing other than filling in large black areas, right? So, you know, like when you got to fill in the background, a giant area all in black, then it's much quicker. Take a brush and just slap it in, man. You're just painting it like you're painting a wall or whatever, you know. And it's much quicker. It does the job faster, and it ends up looking richer and thicker because that's the actual, you know, it's right out of the bottle, right? So, and Marcus says that early Bruce Timm sketches are magic with the chiseled. Oh, but your word magic, Marcus, do you mean magic and wow, they're fantastic, even though he used the chiseled marker? Or are you saying that his early sketches, he used a magic marker that was like chiseled, like the way I was describing? Because if that's the case, like, yeah, I don't really see his early stuff too much, you know. But I know you'll tell me in a minute. Hey, Mike, what's up, pal? Okay, so they are great. Okay, excellent. Okay, so he used good markers then, you know, like, again, they existed. It's just a lot of guys just chose whatever and bought whatever and whatever, you know. They didn't give, because, you know, they didn't give too much thought. An artist usually typically will care more about the end product of their job, which is that I produce this page good enough for it to be printed properly. That's it, you know. Guys over the decades they weren't thinking as they were drawing, I better watch what I use here as my tool, because otherwise those nitpicky collectors are going to get pissed off at me, you know.
Right.
Nobody really gave a thought to that. Now they more so do, more than ever these days, for sure, you know. But, you know, in most of the comic book history, they didn't think that way, you know.
What does Mike Perkins use most of the time? Is he a brush inker? Or is he a...
Yeah, he's a brush guy.
Yeah.
He's pretty much all brush. He does use certain types of pens, but just for little bits of like noodling and feathering here and there, you know. But for the most part, I would call it like any given page is probably at the very least 95% brush.
It shows. I mean, his pages really have beautiful contrast.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And when you see them in person, you can also tell like it was laid down with a brush, not a pen or a marker of some sort, because you don't see, you know, the strokes, right? The strokes that you see, you can tell are brush strokes, not sharp lined or sharp edged markers or pens or whatever, you know?
Right.
Yeah. So it's a more organic. That's why if you ever hear us talk about brush men like Mike or Butch Guys or whoever, you might hear the terminology, you know, that brush guys, the inking is so much more organic. That's that's part and parcel of what we mean by that. It's a organic and more natural look to the ink flow onto the page kind of thing, you know? Yeah. And
instead of looking like my dried out Crayola marker filling in comic when I was a kid.
Exactly. Perfect. Exactly. And yes, Mike, by the way, just sorry, I keep putting it up and putting it down. Gary Martin. Right. Exactly. But I believe he also uses a mix of both. Oh, okay. You were talking about the Tim Kahn sketches. Okay, good. It's nice to know that they still, after all these years, turned out nice to look at, you know? So yeah, Johnny, absolutely. Ink is like, all artist tools are expensive, to be honest. I mean, the brushes are ridiculous. Shit, I remember when I went to art school, when I left high school, and I had to buy brushes and paints. And this was in 86, 87. And I remember then, like, the difference between a crappy brush and a good brush was like, a crappy brush was like around $12 to $15, and the better brushes were like anywhere from 30 to 80. Okay. That was in 1986 or 7. Like, think about that. Oh my God. Like, I haven't looked. I haven't looked at the prices of art tools since I was, in college for that. But I just can't. I don't want to. I don't want to imagine what they must cost now. But yeah, they've always been ridiculously expensive. So, yeah, the think about it. I could be wrong, but as far as I know, I don't believe that the publishers pay for the inks. But I could be wrong. I think it comes out of the artist's own pocket. So yeah, for Mike, yeah, with all you guys know, with all the inks that he lays down on most of his pages, holy crap. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm sure he would appreciate hearing that. But yeah, that's an expensive. It's an extra added, not an unnoticeable expense for him. The inks, for sure. Yeah, and exactly, Rick. In those days, the stuff just needed to be ready. Yeah, photostat ready, and let's shoot it. Yeah, go. Let's meet the deadlines. It's all that matters. And so I guess you're talking about Tim here. He knew how to use a new marker or old marker for textures. Yeah. Well, he's a pro, right? He's a pro's pro. So you kind of expected it from certain guys like him, right? And the Geist BOP cover I got from you has incredible inks and different textures. Exactly. Perfect. Exactly, right? I brought up Butch. That's why I brought up Butch, because, shit, before I ever knew Mike or even knew of his work, I was a fan of Butch's since he first started in 82 or 3 or whatever year that was. And then he was more of a traditional pen ink type guy in the earlier days throughout the 80s, right? But as you know, Johnny, right then into the back half of the 90s, he began to experiment and do more brush stuff. And then into the 2000s. And then ever since then, he's been more of a, old school illustrator type guy than as opposed to comics, straight on comic booky type guy, and I think that's why Perkins started working with Butch in 2001 or whatever it was, at CrossGen. And he learned a lot from Butch. He'll tell you himself. He was a big fan of Butch's. But for those of you who don't know, Mike is like my age. So he's less than a year older than me. So same age range. And so he was a kid, big fan of Butch Geist, just like a lot of us were, and so he ended up learning a lot about using the brush from Butch. So there's another little tidbit for you, for those of you who like that kind of stuff. So Rick says, guys like Wrightson and Nebres had ink running in their veins. Absolutely. And it was all about the brush, especially for a guy like Wrightson too. Holy crap.
Yeah.
He had a whole school of brushes, Yeah, great way to put it. Exactly. Yeah, of course, the sable brushes are the good stuff. But again, even with sable brushes, I remember back in the 80s, Rick, I was told, like, not every sable brush is made the same. So you still had to be careful, I remember that there was different, actually, not only that, there were different types of, don't buy brushes with this hair or that hair, or you're going to get the brush that after one usage, you get the tip that goes like this. It just splits and you can't get it the tip anymore, And it was so true. You buy the cheap stuff, it's going to do that. Like I said, Johnny, you'd be surprised. This is not an industry that has ever been very, how to put it, generous towards its creators, like historically speaking, like over the long term, right? As well as I do, the creators themselves have always complained ad nauseum about, hey, if you want to make money in this hobby, don't get in, or in this business. Here's my advice. Don't get into this business. You want to become a comic book artist? Don't, So a lot of those guys have said that. Even these days, and going as far back as the golden age when the business first got started in the 30s, late 30s, So good evening, or sorry, good afternoon. I can finally say that. Wow. Good afternoon, Ron. Good to see you. And Knights of Old, sorry, I saw you there earlier before. Knights of Old, thanks for showing up, man. Good to see you too. Lou Fine, Beleverett, are some inkers. You are right about that, sir. Yeah, some of the better, finer, to make a pun, old school inker types, right? And Tony, what's up, brother? Good to see you, man. You get what you do get. Yes, and that applies to everything in life, right? Like you get what you pay for. Again, with few exceptions, because there are few exceptions. And yeah, you talk about like food products. I got to say, just to go off on a quick tangent, I don't know about you guys, but for me, when I go shopping, like if I'm gonna get what's a good product example? Ketchup. Ketchup. For those of you who like ketchup, okay. For me, it has always been Heinz. Okay, none of that. Yeah, like none of that store bought. Like, oh, I'm gonna save a whole $1 if I buy the store brand name. Like, no, you don't ever skimp on ketchup. There is such a huge difference in ketchup when you get the non-Heinz stuff. It's crap. It's so bad. And usually, Jason, if you agree with me, usually the problem is that for some reason, the other brands are all watery. Right? They're like watery. They also don't taste the same.
No, there's a weird taste to them.
Yeah, there's this weird, I don't know what it is, but I guess those other brands, that's why they're so cheap, so much cheaper, maybe because they don't source, Heinz probably has always made the effort to source the best tomatoes, right? Grown in the best places or whatever, right?
It's probably the best chemicals that they put in there to
and that too. But another great example, because that was actually the second thing I thought about, Johnny. I have always been an Aunt Jemima guy, always. Like, bar none, Aunt Jemima. I have tried other maple syrups and other sort of store-bought brand Aunt Jemima ripoff type syrups. To me, I don't know. It's not the same. So it's got to be Aunt Jemima. Rest in peace, Aunt Jemima. I know that they had to get rid of her because she apparently was offensive to the world. I don't know if you heard about that, Jason.
Yeah.
Right. So we're still getting the Aunt Jemima, but it just doesn't have her on the label. It's just some generic looking. It looks like one of the generic brands of syrup, So yeah. So there you go. And Rick, as for the fortune cookie, as the fortune cookie said, cheap is expensive. Nice. Let me see. Before I get to an art question, Tony said, even a haircut. Thank you, sir. You got, yeah, exactly. You know all about that, sir. You know very well. That's awesome. I love that. Okay, so let me go to Stanley. Stanley, for those of you who may be watching and don't know Stanley is the guy who loves to come in and he's two things. You know Stanley for two things. You know him because he's always begging us to keep the show going for another 5 hours. Okay, he wants it to go on like indefinitely. And then he's also the guy who hates us going off on any sort of tangents, right? Like if the tangent has nothing to do with original art, he starts to get like impatient. And then he's the guy who'll chime in and try to break it up by asking something about art. But I do love the fact that you throw out questions. Stanley. So let us do this. Stanley, is there different types of paper boards you prefer? Jason, I don't know if you want to, I don't want to handle that. You handle it.
Oh, me.
I don't know if you've ever given it any thought. So,
I didn't even know about different papers when I started this. Right. And I bought, I was on a dealer's website and there was a great Wolverine, just like a convention sketch. I thought that'd be great. I'll take it. Bought it, got it here, and it is on the thinnest of papers. There's even a point where the artist with the pen tore the paper, as they're quickly drawing at a convention, they just right through the paper. So after that, now I do pay attention to paper quality, and I much prefer, the 11x17 Bristol board or A3 paper kind of stuff. That's the nice texture.
Yeah. I agree. I would say the same thing, but I will say, and I say this to any of you guys who like to get commissions. I don't personally, but I would like to see more because I think they look fabulous. I would like to see, and of course, usually it's up to the artist. Like if you go to a convention, you rely on, if you like to go to get sketches from the artists at cons, you always rely on them. They're going to have whatever paper and pens and tools they have. I get that, right? But I would suggest to some of you guys to maybe sometimes go out to an art supply store and buy yourself a pad of paper that you like and maybe but a pad where you can sort of easily tear out. Maybe it's perforated with small perforations, so you can tear it out and it doesn't look all jaggedy. I hate that also. Maybe something like that, and you can pick something that has thicker paper and textured paper. That's what I really like. There's so many papers with different textures, and when an artist pencils on that, oh God, it looks so beautiful. And so I would suggest to you commission guys to maybe think about doing that. Pick out a nice, not only maybe even a nicely textured paper, but also a colored paper. I've seen so many commissions where you get a colored paper, whether it's, I don't know, some shade of a brown or a shade of green. It depends what catches your eye. But boy, colored shades of like brown or gray. Wow, man, when artists work on that stuff, man, the pieces just it's so special. It just comes out so different than your typical sort of pencil on white paper look.
Right.
Yeah. So just the thought to put out there for you guys. And really quickly, Knights of Old, you're right. It's probably just delicious candy by a corn syrup and salt.
Absolutely.
I get it. But I still have to say, regardless of what's in there, Heinz is number one, and it's the only one. There's no alternative for me. There are just some products that I will not make an exception for. I will pay what I have to pay for the Heinz version. And was it Tony here? Yeah, Tony says, so I thought Canadian maple syrup would be better. I don't know. I grew up on Aunt Jemima, and so maybe that's why when I finally tasted Canadian syrup, it's so different that, yeah. So I'm sure some love it.
No, you got to go with the real stuff. You can't go with the synthetic stuff on maple syrup. It's got to be authentic.
But here's the thing: the people that have told me that, I'm like, yeah, you're right. I go for the authentic. I want the authentic Aunt Jemima, except no substitutes. Don't get me another crappy brand. It needs to be Jemima. That's the authentic to me. So that's what I say.
That's because we're kids of the late 70s, early 80s, and we want the trans fat. We don't want this crappy new stuff. We want full on corn syrup.
Exactly. That's that it is what it is. Hey, Rick, when's Wisconsin maple syrup for you? Really? That's interesting. I didn't know that Wisconsin was known for maple syrup, but okay. Yeah, whatever floats your boat. Aunt Regina. Good one. Nice. So Marcus, before Stanley gets pissed off at me again, Marcus, he runs the show. It's really not me. It's Stanley who runs my shows.
Well, what does Stanley like? What does he want to have his art on? Does he like?
Yeah, Stanley, you let us know exactly. What do you like to have your art on? Vellum gives a different look to inks. Yeah, but wouldn't you agree, Marcus, that the thing about Vellum is that you kind of don't get a choice? In other words, what I mean by that is Vellum, by its very nature, because it's not very porous, right? So it's got that slicker feel to it. It's not as porous, so in other words, not as absorbent. So Vellum is great for anybody who wants that slicker look that we were talking about earlier in the program, right? Like that slick, thick, black looking ink. And you don't really get a choice. It's I think because it's just not as absorbent as other paper, you can't really do all the different textures if you're that type of a textural guy, that's what I've seen anyways. I don't know if you can give me an example of somebody who did textural stuff, non-slick looking work on Vellum. I would love to see it, just because out of curiosity, more than anything else, Yeah, Wisconsin and Vermont. Oh, Vermont, I know. Yeah. So John Mita Senior. Yeah, Senior loved thing. That's why a lot of those 70s covers are inked on Vellum. Exactly. He just loved the feel of how the ink came off the tools, right? That's exactly it. I've got fructose fever. Yeah, so Yeah, so there you go. There you have it. Kind of surprised. I mean, Marcus taking a while to answer me, but I guess he must have. Oh, there you go. So, not really, mostly cartoony style. Okay, like Ramita and Darrow. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. So, Johnny, when reading comics, so this is for you, Jason. Do you start with the art in each panel, considering the shot and angle, and then go to the words? I feel like I go too fast and miss the artist's storytelling. Good. Not only good, Johnny, great question. Great question, because I have had not many, but some private conversations about this with certain friends. And I feel like it's something that doesn't get talked about nearly enough. And it really is a great question. Go ahead, Jason. What do you got to say about that?
I have to read the words first. I have to know what the story is, and then I can take it in and sort of see, does the art convey what the story is telling. So yeah, if it's my OCD, if there's words in the panels, I have to know what those are saying first, and then I can kind of look it in. Except maybe like a double page splash
that's the exception though. That's
the exception of wow, but otherwise, no, I'm usually reading the story, and then kind of once I've know what the story is, then I take in the art to kind of see, does it reflect the story. And sometimes you're like, wow, this is a great way. They're really capturing the mood, or they're capturing the story. Sometimes you're like, what the hell's the purpose of this panel? Why did they even put these words in here? You could have drawn what you're trying to convey. You didn't need all of these word balloons, or so
right. But just so we're all clear, because I'm not sure I'm clear yet. Your eye gravitates to the balloons like immediately. Is that what you're saying, right?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean,
Okay, but like, so let's pretend we're on a page. Here, for example, right? Yep. So you saw this page, and so immediately your eyes would go here, and you'd start reading that caption, let's say, right?
Yep.
But in between traveling from this caption to the next one, would your eye even momentarily stop and grab? Let me see what's happening here, and then go here quick, or would you just boom and keep reading, and then keep reading, and later at the bottom of the page, do you look and go back? Do you go back to look at the?
So like if it was that page, my eye would immediately grasp that, okay, we're in space. Okay. And I would see that, and it might be fantastic, but I would see that, but I'd have to know, well, why are we in space?
Yeah,
what are we doing?
Yeah.
And then once I've kind of like I read that, then I could sit there for a minute and go, oh, there's debris, or there's satellites, or there's it's missiles and stuff like that, and I could start to digest the art and take in all the pictures. But even if I flip a page and, oh my God, they just cut off whoever's head, and wow, what a scene. I have to go back and read for a minute, and then kind of come back and wow, can't believe they did that kind of a thing.
Yeah. Okay. I Johnny says that he feels he goes too fast. And you know what, Johnny? I gotta say that there have been times, like throughout my entire, 40 or whatever years, 40, I guess, years of reading comics, I've been all over the place. Literally, like every different way you could think of answering this question, I think I've been there, and I think sometimes, like what you were saying, Jason, about how depending on what's happening with those balloons, like with me, there was a time in, I don't know, some of you guys might remember, in the early 90s, there was a company, I forget who it was, not Gladstone was doing, I think, those Disney reprints, but there was a company that was doing the exact same format, reprinting EC comics. Okay, the 1950s EC comic. And are you familiar with the EC stuff at all, Jason?
A little bit. I mean, golden age stuff, yeah.
Okay. So the thing that those are known for a lot is that the excessive writing. So on any random given page of an EC comic, right, the stories were great. They were like 8-page stories, right? Sort of like a twist at the end, the gotcha twist at the end, right? Formulaic, but fun, really fun, right? Especially the horror and mystery stuff and science fiction stuff. But but they were known for, if you look at the original art, you look at the page, or even in the comic, if you just look at any random EC page, the first thing you actually notice is not the art. It's the fact that at least 50% on average of every panel is covered by captions.
Yeah.
Captions and or balloons, but usually captions. So much words to the point where oftentimes you can tell it's like the characters feel like they're being squashed down like this on purpose because they needed room for all that writing on top. It's like, what the hell, man? And so in those types of comics, and not just EC, but any comic that I feel is, wow, it's like really wordy, like it's word heavy, right? When you notice that, I will, in that comic, I will tend to just, let me look at the art panel to panel and just look at it panel to panel without reading, And then like when I see, okay, I've seen it all right. Then I go back to the top and okay, now let me get through all this dialogue and captioning and I don't get excited when there's too much words or whatever. It's
right.
It's especially as I've gotten older, it's just like I want it to be easier, just something to relax with. And I don't find it relaxing if I have to think too much and when there's that I have to process that much information. Right. It's it feels more like a chore to read the comic, to be honest.
Yeah.
When there's that much writing,
I won't do it justice, but John Byrne explained once when he was teaching some other artists or something like that, or some students, and he was kind of did a thought experiment with them of if you were going to draw a panel page of Batman rushing into Gotham, you could have the first panel, he picks up the phone. Second panel, it's Commissioner Gordon. Third panel, I'll be right there. And it could just draw it all out. But you could have, he picks up the phone, and in the next panel, it's the Batmobile shooting off the road with Gotham in the background, the skyscrapers and stuff like that. And you would know, oh, he picked up the phone and there's something happening in Gotham. And you could really condense your storytelling without having to have, hey, hello. Well, hello, just
the dial the number.
Exactly. Like 367 221. Yeah. You don't have to do that. And when I heard that explanation, I started looking at pages that way, going, how could you have cleaned this up? Did you really have to draw? Or I'll do the same thing with the word balloons and the captions of how could you have cleaned this up? Did I really need to read 12 different things to tell me that you're going to walk down the street? Or you could just shown me the front door and then you're down the street, kind of a thing.
Yeah, it's a great observation, Jason, because it's something we should definitely talk more about. Unfortunately, we'll be coming to a close in a few minutes, guys. Just to remind you, we are closing this down at 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock for the West Coast. But it's a great observation because what you are essentially, everything you just said falls under the category of storytelling. Right? It's something that I think on these shows we don't talk enough about. Like we certainly talk a lot more about style, right? Because that's what most fans and collectors recognize first. You learn to recognize an artist's style, being able to tell the difference between this guy and that guy, but most people don't ultimately end up learning the basics of illustration, right? The root, right, of how things are composed, which is the how to tell a story, right? All that stuff. So it's really great that you said that because I just noticed Marcus. He's doing Stanley's job for him.
Going for another hour.
Oh my god, that's so funny. It really is one of those parts of the underbelly, right? The underdrawing of any given page, the storytelling that we don't really give enough attention to in conversation. And it's so important because there are a lot of fabulous storytellers or some artists who are so flashy with their style. They get so many accolades because of style that, And a lot of people I noticed, and there's somebody in mind that I have right away. I don't want to bring the name up, right? It's a current, very popular artist. Okay. And one thing I noticed is I love, he does some great technique with his tools, but his storytelling has some serious issues.
Mm-hmm.
His camera, or lack thereof, the camera movement.
Yep.
The layout is so boring. It's just like, oh my God, it's terrible. And nobody notices because they're so entranced by the style, right?
Well, I think that's what modern comics today are lacking, is you don't have these runs of a great writer paired with an artist who complements them, however that should be. If they understand that, okay, I'll just put a few notes on a page and hand that off to the artist, and the artist will do my work in storytelling, or vice versa. But you get these little short runs of 6 issues and one artist and one inker, and then they're gone. And then the next 6 issues are a different writer with a different artist. And it's very, you don't get these nice runs like Walt Simonson's Thor, or, Claremont on X-Men and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it's definitely an art to it.
Yeah. No, exactly. I mean, is that we can't really go into it now, obviously, but that's it. It's not even just, it depends, right? Is the artist the writer, right? Is it a different writer, right, than the artist? Mm-hmm. Because yes, in today's comics, what a lot of people don't know, I'm not even sure if you know, or how much of this you know, Jason, but in today's comics, a lot of the storytelling is actually determined by the writer. Because it's the writer who hands in a script to the artist, and the scripts are typically done in panel by panel format. Now, some guys are a little looser and will say, all right, Joe, on this page, it's going to be a 7-panel page, right? So they'll be told how many panels, but they'll leave it to the artist to figure out where and sort of how to place the panels. Mm-hmm. Believe it or not, it's very common for some of the writers to say, okay, so on this panel, Joe, I'm thinking of a wide angle where so-and-so is kind of standing with his back to you, looking out that way. You know what I mean? So they're really doing a lot of the artist's work. Yeah. So it's a whole new ballgame, this whole current generation. It's not what it used to be, So again, another topic that would be great to talk about, and maybe we should kind of think about this. And you can come back with me, because the thing is we want to do a show and tell, but I would also love to come back, and since we're already talking about it now, do a show like this where it's maybe part of the 101 series, which I put your previous episode into, right? Mm-hmm. I rebranded it as Comic Art 101. Maybe that's what we should do another Comic Art 101 where it's like, okay, about the aspects of art, comic art, that we don't usually talk about much. And maybe do a whole episode where maybe we can do a whole episode where it's about storytelling, Mm-hmm. I don't know, storytelling, inking methods, what have you, or whatever. Yeah. Maybe, but Stanley, sorry, my friend, but where's that message you put? You threw out another question that we don't have time. We're not going to get to it. I know, Marcus, that kickoff hasn't happened. It's not for that. I promised that I would leave everybody a half an hour. People are doing plans to have friends over, this and that and the other. So I promised I would leave a half an hour before the game time for everybody to just, do what they're going to do before game time. And that's it. So I will call it, but let me see if there's any last couple of things. Johnny, I feel like the writer-artist combo where the writer and artist are the same person can yield great storytelling from panel to panel. Well, of course, when you're the same guy, right? You're the same. It's the same brain. It's not 2 different brains trying to control the final product. So of course, it's absolutely different when it's just one person versus a team up, right? Totally different techniques and things come into play with that, right? CJ, money seems to be the cheesesteaks, but the smoked burnt ends are my gut. An interesting way to put it. Agreed. Johnny, part of why I'm such a big Mike Grell fan. Oh, what did oh yes, right. In reference to when it's a writer artist, when the guy is the same, right? The writer artist is the same person, kind of thing. I've always, me too. I've always loved solo creators. You know, when guys can do the whole shebang. You know, that's true. The Marvel method has kind of gone the way of the dodo bird for the most part, CJ. I hear through the grapevine, not going to mention names, I hear through the grapevine that it still exists, but it really is quite the exception to the rule. Pretty much it's the sort of full script. The artist gets, literally, okay, so in this panel, this character says this character answers with that, and then this character says this. Yeah. And you know what's funny is I used to think that artists would hate that because coming from the old school of the old days of the 80s and before, where the artist, a lot was left to the artist. And I just figured, back in those days, they were used to having that freedom. I thought that today's artists would hate the current way, the DC, we call it, let's say, method of doing things, full script method. Mm-hmm. Come to find out, to my great surprise, after speaking to quite a few artists about that, most of them are like, oh no, because of the fact that you have to work on a deadline, I like full script because yes, the creativity and the storytelling, right? It's not fully mine. Right. Although a lot of writers leave leeway for you to change up and sort of rearrange how you would like it. Right. But it's so worth it just to not have to spend, because it would be easily an hour or two every morning when you wake up before you even put anything down on paper, just thinking how you're going to lay out your page, just doing thumbnails, trying to do little sketches to work out what you have in your head as to what the plot is telling you got to put down. If you're only working on Marvel method, right? They're like, no way. It just wastes so much time that no way. I'm happy to do, the current full script method. So there you go. Yeah, that ain't going to happen, Maki Poo Poo. Yeah, exactly. Just go ahead and draw. That's it. Get to work, Stanley, you have to ask a few rabbit trail questions to keep the show going. No, it ain't gonna happen. So don't even bother, Stanley, because we're not gonna answer them. I'm gonna keep my promise for a change, and I've already passed it by 3 minutes, so I can never see the advantage of full script. Exactly. So yeah, thank you guys. Thanks, Rick. Really enjoyed it. You guys, thank you. Even though there wasn't many of us here, about 15 for the duration. I don't care. For me, as long as it's fun. And you guys always make it fun. It's thanks to you guys in the chat, especially guys like you, Jason, who show up every week and always make it the fun that it is.
Happy to do it. Happy to be here.
And we'll definitely do this again at some point, whether it's, like I said, a more discussion thing or the show and tell. But we'll do something again, sure.
Yeah.
I look at him trying to screw us. Waffles or pancakes? As a kid, pancakes. But it's been ages since I cared about pancakes. And I don't want to eat pancakes. I feel like unhealthy after I've eaten a slew of pancakes. I'm like, oh, why did I do that? What? See, Marcus is just acting the way that Stanley always does, right?
Right.
When he knows we're finishing, he starts popping out questions. What has Jason pocket since the last time?
Right.
Nice try, but it ain't gonna happen. Oh, look at that. Has his focus changed? Ron, enjoy the game yourself as well. Honey, I will see you in a few minutes. And guys, don't forget, next week, I know a few guys already dropped off. Next week, I don't know if you know, but I scheduled the show last night. So I will leave you with this. Jason, hang in there for a couple of seconds if you don't mind.
Okay.
But mute yourself, please, after you say bye-bye.
See you guys.
Okay. And mute yourself now. Appreciate it. Thank you very much. To all of you. But guys, don't forget here, let me put it up. We'll close this out. Next week's show is another show and tell. And here we go. Let me get this one for you. It is a show and tell. Oh my God. Where is it? Hold on, guys. This should be quick. Here we go. It's going to take just nothing more than a few moments. And where is it? Here we go. Okay, so now it's just loading into my software. Thank you for hanging in. And here we go. I'm gonna leave you with this. It's show and tell next week with your friend and mine, Dino Maurizio. So that should be a lot of fun. As you guys know, Dino's a great guy, got a great collection. Yeah, so be here at the usual time next week, 8 o'clock Pacific and 5 o'clock Eastern, and we will have a great time with Dino, watching, looking at some great art, and of course having some good laughs as we always do. So thanks again, guys, for everything. Really, really appreciate you all. And that's it. Enjoy the game. See you next week.